Today's Road to Rank 1 episode has everything. Blunders, comebacks, and innovative strategies. Starting with a game here versus G-Man on Ancient Sister. For the people that are not aware who G-Man is, I didn't know either at this time, but apparently it is the player formerly known as Vanya, formerly known as Ratata, and now known as Wayne, who performed a pretty impressive feat in the most recent DreamHack Summer. He just barely lost to Serral in his group, but managed to take out Showtime as well as Spirit. So definitely a powerful player. Let's not forget that he did end up losing to Harstem in the end, but that's a story for another time, my dear friends. For now, he opens up with a Proxy hatch, or well, just a hatchery on my natural. And that always means trouble. You have to pull a couple of workers. Ideally, this doesn't happen. But there's not so much you can do about it if they time it well, especially if it's a hatch first. If it's a hatch first at home and then a second hatch, if you're a Protoss player, you should be capable of figuring that out and capable of blocking that. But with this particular build order, it often is quite difficult. So it tends to not really be the case. We see 5 workers are being pulled down here, which is the correct call, which is why I made it as well. You want to pull 5 workers, get a Zealot out, get a pretty fast Cybernetic score as well, and life generally should be okay. Now, do note that I wanted to open up this game with a late scout or a no scout. I went gas first, so my core is a little bit delayed because of that. And also, I've decided to not send out a probe whatsoever here. That could be considered a mistake, but this type of hatch first on the natural almost never really gets followed up by an all-in, so I don't really mind it too much. I think it's an okay call. It's a risk that you can take. It is a risk, but it's a pretty small risk, so I'm okay with it. Zealot is out. He's forced into cancelling his hatchery and then build an Evo chamber. That one's going to get taken out as well, obviously. I started an Adept so I can get some scouting across the map. And note that this Cyber Core is about 10 seconds later than it usually would be had I played a standard gate before gas. But because my initial plan here was to not scout, I went for a gas before gateway. And that does kind of bite me in the bum here in this particular scenario, where I get a later scout, I get a later attack, I get a later core unit out here. So a little bit frustrated is what I am currently. My Nexus isn't delayed because of that. And of course I do have slightly more money because I decided not to scout altogether. But I ideally want to put on pressure as soon as I can after taking out my opponent's hatchery. So go across the map, I see an overlord, I see like, hey wait, that hatchery is really late. So it must have been hatch into pool into hatch. I still decide to send my second Adept across the map anyway, which might have been a little bit of a mistake. I think the moment you see such a late second hatchery, you don't really need to do that. Perhaps just scouting is going to be fine. I decided to send both of them in. I want to force out as many links as possible, of course, while dealing scenarios. I see that speed has finished at this point. I'm like, wait a second, this is kind of weird. Why does he have speed already? This is a really fast speed. He basically rushed out speed. And I'm desperately trying to get back home with all of my adepts. Go for a full wall as well, while simultaneously trying to kill this drone in my main base. I see that I'm being chased, and now I'm like, oh, wait a second, this ain't no ordinary game. this is a freaking Baneling buster, because there was no unit in the wall. All of these Banelings are going to remain alive. It's important that my Oracle comes out. I try to replenish that pylon immediately. Some decent probe splits here, but I lose both of my adepts in the natural right now. I've got to lose a bunch of workers in my main base. I barely get the block here. This drone is still happily running around. I'm a little bit slow with the response, pulling my adept towards the low ground, but it still seems to be fine. Did end up losing a bunch of mining due to that Baneling attack, but perhaps Luke's okay. I have to cancel one pylon so I can afford a secondary wall. And now it's simply just a walling game. If I wall in time every single time and I get enough DPS out with enough oracles, life might be okay. Sadly for me at this moment, I don't really have enough cash to build another adept. And I also don't have pylon power to, get that adept out, which is fairly frustrating. My main focus is on getting oracles out and making sure that my wall doesn't get broken. I see him morphing in a couple of banelings at this point. I'm trying to target him down in time, but don't quite end up getting my rewall, as a little bit of micromanagement there out of me. And now my main base is in trouble. There is still a drone over there. My oracles are out of energy, and I decide to just step out. It's a build I haven't really seen before, and a build that killed me. And I think that's kind of the beauty of StarCraft 2 in a way as well. Like, I really like losing to strategies. Like, I'm a strategy game enjoyer, and although it's also cool to be outplayed, you know, in a long macro game, you can definitely respect your opponent for that. It's like, oh, he really owned me there by just outplaying me purely through speed. But these strategic wins, to some people, they might feel like cheap wins, but I freaking love it. Like, he kind of figured everything out. He saw my gateway time and was like, okay, this gateway is too late. That means he went for gas first. That probably means he didn't want to scout. If I get the hatch block, I can follow this up with a Bane Bust, and he's not going to have any information. Now, I still don't think this is a very optimal build order that he played. I don't think it's a very good one, but I think it's good enough to get you one win. And that's really all you need of it in StarCraft 2. If you can have 5 build orders like this, you just manage to win. Well, if you win with 3 games in a best of 5, you won a best of 5. That can be a semifinals. And I think a lot of the time, people kind of forget that StarCraft is a strategy game as well as a very mechanical game. The highest level players often win purely through their mechanics and being very defensive and responding to threats. But there's still a lot to be discovered in terms of aggression. I often feel, especially with Zerg, there's still a lot of options that Zergs don't utilize because they're so fond of building queens. I think the queen, whenever a Zerg builds like 6-7 queens, it really limits their aggressive potential. But we've seen players like Mio Maika just completely cut out queens, have a lot of aggressive potential. Now, like I said, I don't think this is a good way to play standard. I think there's always going to be holes in that type of play style. There's going to be builds you die against, but there's also a lot of builds you're going to be good against, or you might just straight up win some games with it. I mean, I myself have lost to Mio Maika in the past, despite my mechanics being, well, no offense to him, but significantly better than his. Like, I'm a quicker player than he is, but purely through strategical thinking, he managed to beat me. And that's why I can really appreciate a game like that last one, despite me having to give up a bunch of my MMR for it. I still think it's cool. Like, it's the core of strategy games to me. Is that with a good strategy, something that you think about, or like good in the moment. Like, I don't know if that was pre-prepared or if he actually made those reads. Like, it's impossible for me to tell. I didn't ask him afterwards, but yeah, it's just something beautiful about it. Next game here, I play a build order which is also very uncommon. I opened up with a 17 Nexus Gasless. This is something I've been playing in my Greediest Man Alive series. And I was kind of happy with how it felt. I was like, oh, this feels kind of okay. Like, if you do a later scout versus Terran with this, it feels like you have a little bit of extra money. I've managed to go into Stargate builds with it as well, and I'm kind of okay with it. Playing against Baby Marine here. It's a very good European player, Italian Terran. Some people might know him as Rainer's brother, but I think at this point he has proven himself good enough that, you know, we can talk about him as his own person. I always find it a little bit condescending in a way when you say, he is X's brother, or, you know, like a cousin. You know, it feels like they have no right of their own, but I think Baby Marine is a very good player by himself. Like, especially in the early game, I find him quite dangerous. He has some nice movement as well in the mid game often. He's one of these players that within, I think, a year and a half or maybe 2 years, I'm not saying he's at the top of the European scene, but can definitely be somewhere up there, you know, among the other good Terran players. He could be considered a good Terran player, I think. He still has a decent rate of improvement as well. So I open with the fastest possible third base with Blink, or one of the fastest possible third bases with Blink. I'm looking for the Reaper, and I'm following this up with no robotics facility. Now, one thing to note is that there was no bunker on the other side of the map, as well as no Marine. We noticed this now, but I didn't notice this in the game. I give you about 5 seconds to think about what this might actually be, or what this could mean. I didn't quite realize, I didn't draw the correct conclusion in this game. So now I see the medevac flying at 416 and 4 Hellions. I'm like, wait, with a Reaper opener, this wasn't gas first. So this was just a Reaper into factory, into reactor, with a proxy starport. Otherwise you can't hit this fast. The Pro Splits are actually surprisingly good for a slow Protoss player like myself. And I hardly lose any worker, but I'm losing... Well, I mean, I still end up losing a bunch of workers. I just don't have any units ready. But I lose way less workers than I probably should have in this scenario. Like, if I had split slightly worse, this could have been terrible. Also managed to fly out. So this was probably the worst case scenario. I didn't scout it. I lose a crap ton of workers. Now my third base is done. I have a forge done as well, because I skipped the robotics facility. Thank the Lord I skipped the robotics facility. Otherwise my eco would have sucked even harder. But we're currently 5 minutes into the game. I'm hardly mining gas. I don't have that many probes. I'm just in a bad spot overall, to be honest. And Baby Marine is also one of these players that if you lose to him, he's going to take a lot of your points. I think he's like 5'8 or 5'7, maybe 5'9. It's going to take a solid 35 points or so. It's not something that I enjoy. I often say that I don't care about MMR, but I also kind of do care about MMR, you know? It is still a nice thing to have. You'd rather have it. It's like people saying that money doesn't make you happy. The people that say always have a lot of money. It's the same with people that say MMR doesn't make you happy. It's always the people that have a crap ton of MMR. Like, I like having MMR, okay? It makes life comfortable for me. I enjoy my MMR. I deserve it as well. I worked for it. Worked hard for it. Leave me alone. So I'm trying my best here, but I have very little units. Like, the standard timing for Terran to hit after something like this could maybe be 6:30, 6:45. And they could hit with like 110, 115 supply or so. Currently, we're, well, about 35 seconds away from that, and I only have 72 supply. I don't have any extra gateways yet. I have legitimately 8 units. It's not enough. It is simply not enough. He tries to run by. I do stop him from getting any more damage. I have no map control either, don't forget that. No observers here, no nothing. So yeah, this is... I don't want to say this is the worst scenario that I've ever played in, but... it's not a very good scenario. I want to send my stalkers across the map. This is risky by itself. If a drop is happening here in towards my main base, I'm just dead. I don't have units in position. I want him to move straight across the map towards me, and hopefully I can actually get something done. Like, hopefully. So he starts moving out right now. I see 2 tanks. I see a very damaged medevac. I don't quite get the kill on that medevac. It's pretty darn close. My gateways finally finish up, and I can start warping in a couple of units. Still don't get any medevac. Another kill on a Marine there. My charge isn't even done yet, as I'm truly starting to panic at this point. Lose 1 Stalker for a Marine as he stims forward. And I need to win some time. It is so important for me to get charge. Without charge, this is an impossible fight. With charge, it's a very difficult fight, but perhaps doable. I can't allow him to go in towards my natural ramp, but usually whenever they have tanks, they push kind of slow. So I use that to my advantage. I set up my flank over here. And then I go, well, pretty much synchronized attack. This is a nice simultaneous attack. The 3 tanks get completely destroyed here. I blink forward, and all of a sudden my position isn't looking so terrible anymore. My eco probably isn't great. If he gets mines behind it or ghosts, I could still be in trouble, but my upgrades are quite good. And I've really, well, basically diminished his medevac count, which is fantastic. The lower the medevac count, the harder it is for him to multitask, which is one of the things I'm really afraid of right now, because I simply have no vision. Now, this is a thing that you can do as well, of course. Is you can look at this game and say, well, these trades against the medevacs weren't necessarily that great, Kevin, or Harstem, or however you want to call me. But they were good because I don't have any vision. I don't have observers around the map. And then lowering the medevac count means that it's way harder for him to drop efficiently into my main base. Now he had to send a damaged medevac in. That one got sniped immediately. The second one also got sniped. And although I do like the play of trying to multitask here or trying to drop in towards my main, it definitely did not end up working out for him. I'm going to end up losing a couple of workers, and I think I could have microed this away a little bit more. Still have pretty poor eco at this point. Definitely I'm going to need more workers here. Because even if you're up in workers against the Terran, if you're 3 base versus 3 base, the mules are always going to make up for the difference, especially if you're mining very little gas. If you're mining 6 gas and you're pumping Colossus or High Templar with Storm at this point, I think it's a different story, but that's not what I'm doing in this time, this time around. I do decide to move across the map, but this isn't so much to try and kill my opponent as it is to make him scared. As Sun Tzu once said, pretend to be strong when you're weak and pretend to be weak when you're strong. Right now I'm feeling weak and I want to pretend to be strong. So I'm sending zealots into different bases. I just want to keep him busy while I'm trying to desperately get into something else, honestly. As you see, I'm teching up behind this, trying to kill as many of these dudes as I can, and just freaking keep him busy. If I can keep him busy, that feels good for me. And the moment I can't keep him busy anymore, and he starts pushing across the map with ghosts and mines, I'm just going to be in a world of trouble. So here he goes in, and I decide, all right, my time to fly in with the Prism as well at this point. Do want to get a forward base, despite it seeming like a dicey call here. I think eventually I'm going to need to get some type of lead in this game, and an econ lead is always a nice one. Try to fly away here with my Prism. Do manage to stay alive for now, as these mines absolutely destroy my zealots for some reason. I'm not quite sure why I didn't micro that away. There's two calls I can make here. I can either say, hey, I want to get disruptors to deal with a higher mine count, or I can get colossus. Colossus are often a safer choice in the long term, but I feel like I've kept him at home long enough that he probably wants to desperately push across the map. So my plan here is to completely base trade with zealots if he moves out, and then try to stay alive, like barely hang in there with disruptors. And this is a really cool play that someone like Zest used to do a lot. It's basically saying, hey, if we're fighting at my home, I'm losing, but I'm going to try to just stay alive. I can give up my fourth base if I kill your natural and your third. And that's pretty much what I'm doing here. I'm getting a massive run by in. Now, the scariest thing for me is if he can... almost managed to get that disruptor shot off. If he gets to drop in towards my main base, but it doesn't quite seem to be the case yet. I don't have enough disruptors at this moment, and I don't quite think I have enough zealots either. So this is actually becoming a little bit dicey for me right now. Still need to just try and hang in there. Zealots in his main base. Now I can warp in more zealots at home, or I can warp them in my opponent's side of the map, and then eventually try to recall them home. I think warping them on the other side of the map here might have been better, so I can kill his buildings quicker. Like, I can't engage into my opponent right now anyway, so it doesn't look brilliant for me. Do note that he hasn't killed my third or my fourth or my natural. All my bases are still alive. He's just straight up going for the production. I think that is the correct call. The more warp-ins he gives me, the better it's going to be for me. But luckily I had all my robots at my third base, which means that I can continue my disruptor production. And I'm gonna end up taking out one of these command centers right now. I can take out all of his depots, so even if he managed to fly away with his production, he's not going to be capable of really doing anything with it, because he just simply does not have the supply. But this base stays alive. As I also kill this armory, that means that his mines will not continue being invisible after he burrows them and after they shoot. This is not necessarily a great fight. I don't really want to chase. Also kind of got to be careful. There's still 2 orbital commands. I didn't kill a lot of workers on his third base, and I did lose a lot of workers. So the main advantage that I have right now is that I have more probes and more bases, but I don't have any production. So I do know that he doesn't have a fourth base, because I have that covered with units. This is a good recall out of me. And another thing that I really like about my position, looking at it, is that I have good upgrades, and I can probably continue upgrading if I just get a pylon at that fort. Wouldn't actually mind getting a couple of batteries either at like my fort base here. I think that would have been a good call. Not quite sure if I do that. Definitely would help against any attacks that he might go for. Because I have a prism on his side of the map, any attack that he will go for is potentially game ending, in that he's forced to basically kill me or die, because my prism can counter attack with 4 zealots, maybe another 3 zealot warp in as well. Can make it really dangerous, right? My first Colossus is now out. That one's definitely going to be a massive help over here. It's my third observer this game gets constructed. 13 minutes and 32 seconds into the game, I finally get some vision out on the map. And some vision that he can't see, because of course with pylons and zealots you have vision, but he always sees that you're looking over him. And the beauty of the observer is that he has no clue as to what is happening. So here I can easily save my spotter units, and I can easily go in with my prism, and he's most likely not quite going to be ready for that. However, a couple more zealots just defensively trying to stay alive. And as here I have such a huge army force as well. Mainly consisting out of zealots. It's not quite ideal. I see that he has his production all set up again. I'm like, all right, let me just continue attacking this factory. I mean, I'm up at least a base, right? That's what I know. I don't know if he's mining from his natural right now, but if he isn't, then I'm up 2 base. So there's no real reason for me to truly commit into anything. You just gotta make sure that I don't take a terrible fight. And as long as that doesn't happen, then I'm pretty happy. You can see that I'm really lacking gas. So I start to attack into his third base. In my mind, he didn't have this natural again. I'm like, oh wait, he does have that natural. That's not so good for me. So I'm just gonna end up sending the zealots over there. I can clear the upgrades again, and eventually if you just kill the upgrades of your opponent while you yourself are still getting upgrades, that's often a really good thing as well. There goes the eBay. I can probably recall these zealots again. Yep, it's quite a bit of money that you're saving there, and this allowed me to move across the map pretty much uncontested, which is one of the hardest things to do as Protoss. Once you're in an aggressive position, Protoss very often wins. But getting in an aggressive position against Terran, who is always flying around the map with medevacs and running around with units, can just be so darn difficult. So he lifts all of his buildings. I hit one big disruptor shot. And he taps out with GG. And a beautiful little comeback here after a terrible start in the early game against those Hellions. And that really is the trademark of a fabulous player, of course. That despite being behind in the early game, you can make a comeback like that. That's huge class there out of Harstem. What a player. Final game here is going to be against Mindel VK. For the people that don't know Mindel VK, he's a Protoss player, a nuisance on the ladder for me. He's taken many MMR points away in the past. And I kind of wanted to show what I've been up to in Protoss versus Protoss. I decided recently that I need to be capable of playing the 1-gate expand like MaxPax does. It makes no sense that MaxPax, currently the best player in PvP, is the only player in the world that is capable of playing the 1-gate expand. So I've been practicing a lot with, well, mixed results. The results have been a bit of a mixed bag. I've won some games against good players. I've lost some games against players that I can't recall losing to in the past 5 years. So it's an inconsistent result so far, but I'm just happy that, you know, I'm getting a better grasp at it every day. I've played about 40 games with it so far in PvP, and slowly but surely I'm kind of getting there. Now, Mindel VK is a player that is known to be relatively aggressive in general, so it's perfect to play a build like this against someone like Mindel VK, because he'll test you out, you know? I don't necessarily want to do the testing while I'm playing tournament matches. I want to do the testing on ladder. I think it's important that you have most of the theory down before you start playing actually important games. So I'm scouting around. I see that he has a second pylon at home, and I caught his scout as well going across the map. And I'll actually see where he's going. See him proxy a pylon. And in this case, there's a very simple solution to my problems. I need to see what his proxy building is going to be, and then I can respond with my own tech. Don't forget that no matter what he proxies, I can always respond to it. I have about 10 seconds or so to respond. That is about the rush distance at which he is proxying. So if it's a proxy robo, I can get my own robotics facility. If it's a gateway, I can get my own robotics facility, because that's best against gateway alliance. If it's a Stargate, I can get my own Stargate. I can play defensive Phoenix or defensive Void Race, depending on what his first unit is. So there's a lot of options there for me. I see that it's a gateway, and I decide to go for a robotics facility. This is technically the easiest all-in to hold for me out of all of them, because I scout what it is. As a response, I can throw down a robotics facility. You get one immortal out against a 4-gate or a 3-gate or a 3-gate blink. It doesn't really matter. This is going to be very heavy on the gate units, that I do know. And I really should not be capable of losing this game the moment you have an immortal out. Immortals just completely destroy stalkers, and they destroy stalkers doubly hard if you also have a battery with it. And I'm gonna make sure that I have at least one battery ready when I'm going. Super battery can always be activated as well. This is a little bit of a tricky start here, as I start my immortal in the robotics facility. Micro my stalker back, of course. Decides to not chase. I think he maybe should have chased there. Versus my stalker to try and get the kill, because I think he would have gotten the kill, but then again, he could have been afraid of my first immortal. Now I realize that when I said I started my first immortal, I accidentally started a prism. Now, a prism is a great unit to have, but it's not such a great unit if you're trying to defend against a 3-gate or a 4-gate, because it doesn't do any damage. So right now I have about 350 minerals and 100 gas invested in this prism that doesn't provide any real value except the ability to dodge a shot every now and again. So it's completely useless. I do manage to dodge a couple of shots, but even that isn't going super well. He starts fighting my batteries at this point. I managed to dodge another shot, dodge 2 more shots, but my first battery does go down. I lose my first to death, and now my immortal is out, gets the first stalker kill, but I mean, if this was my second immortal at this point, which it could have been, this game would be uber over, right? It would have been so much better for me. That's not quite the case yet. I do manage to keep this stalker alive, and I'm in a fine spot, but I haven't gotten the default win that I probably should have had. He also decided to warp in a couple of adepts, which I think is a good move. I was not in time with my walling either. I do end up clearing a couple of these stalkers while he targeted down my battery. And warp in an adept defensively. I have plenty of workers, so I can lose a couple. It's not the end of the world to lose a couple if you're up an entire base. Now with 2 immortals out, I can 2-volley stalkers, which is huge. I cut off the stalker reinforcements over here. He taps out with a G, and despite the prism first opener, I do manage to win this game. And yeah, that's going to be it for me today, my friends. If you did enjoy this episode, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave something down in the comments as well. Be sure to check out my other videos. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Adios. Tomorrow, new video, as always.